It's the problem when you work with scumbags. They'll double-cross you just like they'll double-cross anybody. The whole thing is on tape. I can't think of a greater instance of abuse of public trust. And if your own attorney general is doing it, who knows how deep, how far, how wide
There is a silent panic spreading through Washington, and it's all because of one man. Josh Hawley didn't just walk into this hearing to ask questions. He walked in to dismantle a cover-up that has been years in the making. For 25 years, they thought they could operate in the dark, but today, Senator Hawley has brought the receipts. You are about to witness the most brutal 60 seconds in Senate history, a takedown so savage it left the room in absolute silence. The game is over, the truth is out, and there is no escape. Hit that subscribe button right now if you believe Hawley is the hero DC fears most. Let's get into it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling this hearing. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. Ms. Cole, I just want to start with something you said just a second ago. You said it's not hateful to question fake science. It's not hateful to protect children. It's not hateful to say that there are men and that there are women, and those two things are different. It's not hateful to say that little girls shouldn't be told that they really ought to be boys. It's not hateful to do any of those things. And I just think it's time to speak a little truth to power. Because the fact of the matter is, it is not bigotry to protect children in this country. I have sat here and listened to this side of the aisle say just a moment ago to compare protecting children and young people like you, Ms. Cole, to Jim Crow. We were just told a second ago it is the new Jim Crow to say that boys shouldn't be in girls' locker rooms. It is the new Jim Crow to say that men shouldn't be playing women's sports. I'm sorry, but that is the most ridiculous, outrageous thing I have heard in I don't know how long, and that is a real prize in the United States Senate. That is absolute garbage. And to hear these lies, and those are lies, spewed in this hearing room is absolutely astounding to me. It is time to speak the truth. Protecting children is not wrong. It is our job. It is right. It is justice. It's what we are here for. And I think it's time that we start exposing the nonsense, the outrageous nonsense that has been foisted on our children. You've testified to it, Ms. Cole. You said that you were pressured into transitioning. You were denied your full rights and the information that should have gone with your care. Your parents were not informed. You were kept in the dark. And the truth is, your case isn't a one-off case. Your case is systemic. We're seeing it over and over and over. You know, we're seeing things like what you wrote, Mr. Minter, in your book from 1999. You wrote, let's just look at this, that children as young as 2 years old can have gender identity dysphoria and things like boys rather, who want to avoid rough and tumble play in competitive sports who show little interest in cars and trucks may be gender dysphoric. You said about girls, let's look at the girls poster. You said about girls that little girls who have an identification with powerful male figures such as Batman or Superman, or a lack of interest in dolls or any form of feminine dress, may have gender dysphoria. You're a doctor?
You are quoting from the criteria from the DSM.
You're a doctor.
Those quotes are from the DSM.
You're a doctor.
I am a lawyer, and those quotes are from the DSM.
You're a trained therapist.
I am a lawyer, and those quotes.
You're an advocate, in fact, is what you are. You're an advocate. You're an advocate for this ideology, and that behind me is outrageously ridiculous. The idea that a 2-year-old girl who doesn't want to play with dolls might be gender dysphoric is ridiculous. It is outrageous, and it is time to say so. I don't care what labels you put on it. I don't care how many different titles you put on it in your books. It is absolutely outrageous. And I'll tell you one other thing, Mr. Chairman. There is no reason for this Congress to be funding outfits that perform transgender surgeries and force transgender therapies on minor children. And I have in mind Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood spends enormous sums of money trying to push transgender surgeries, hormone therapies on children. The Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts, for example, advertises gender-affirming hormone therapy to minors who are 16 years old. We've got it right here. In fact, urging them to come and participate in these studies and taking the hormones so that they can get compensated, incentives for it. Here's the incredible thing. The United States is funding this. Do you know that Planned Parenthood got $1.5 billion? Let me say that again, $1.5 billion diverted from Medicaid and Medicare, taken from the poor, taken from our seniors, so that they could do this. This is outrageous. This is absolutely outrageous. It is unconscionable. It's time for this Congress to act. I heard one of my friends on the other side of the aisle say a moment ago that malpractice cases really were the answer. You know what? I agree with that. They are the answer. And we ought to pass legislation right now in this Congress that will enable more malpractice suits for people like you, Ms. Cole. If that really is the answer, and if there really is nothing to hide, then good. Let's put power in the hands of the people, and let's open up the courtroom doors for those who have had these gender hormone surgeries, these transition therapies forced on them as you had, Ms. Cole. Let's open up the courtroom doors. Let's stop funding with taxpayer money hormone therapies, treatments, surgeries for minor children without their parents' consent. Let's reject the lies that this is somehow bigotry. Let's do our jobs and protect the children of this country. Thank you, Mr.
How deep,
Chairman.
how far, how wide this.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Bernstein, if I could just start with you. You worked in the Minnesota Department of Human Services, is that right? For
Correct.
20 years?
Correct.
Or more? And at the agency there, you served in roles related to contract management and compliance. Is that
Correct.
basically right? Several years ago, looking here at your written testimony, you say that you started to notice some inconsistencies in contracts that came across your desk. Can you just describe what those inconsistencies or irregularities were, what they looked like?
It was anything from obvious conflicts of interest to large advances being given. If the contract was for $3 or $4 million, we were giving $1 million advances before any work had occurred. That is a very risky thing to do. A business can just close up and they've got your money and they haven't done a thing for you. There was...
To whom were these, if I might ask, to whom were these advances going? What kind of entities, do you recall? What kind of entities were we talking about?
So states do not, in general, do their own social services. They do not do services for the residents of their state. They contract out that work to most often nonprofits, occasionally profits, but most often nonprofits. And so those are then considered grant contracts. And those grant contracts are well regulated in statute, well defined in statute, and we were doing many things that were not compliant with statute. There would be a contract with a dollar amount that had no formula, nothing that I could find that would establish why that dollar amount was.
Could you detect a pattern in these inconsistencies?
In general, no, but I did notice a slight preference for our tribes. Our tribes were one situation where I saw contracts that no one could explain to me why they were the dollar amount that they were.
What happened when you reported these inconsistencies to your superiors?
I was called racist. You know, and then I was walked out. There was quite a smear campaign. I was investigated. I have about 400 pages of investigatory information about me.
You'd worked there for 20 years at this point. I mean, you have a
Yes.
long track record.
Yes.
As a civil servant, as a public servant. You bring this to the attention of your supervisors, as you are supposed to do, and it sounds to me like you were retaliated against. I mean, is that a fair thing to say?
Yes, absolutely.
And how did this end? I mean, how long did this go on? What was the result of it?
It actually still goes on. This started for me 7 years ago, but I am still just shuffled from one job to another. A supervisor about a year ago said, well, we have to find you something else to do now. So now I redact documents. I have 9 years of college, and I put black marks on documents for media requests.
Do you think, in light of the revelations of widespread fraud and abuse in the state, that maybe there's a systemic problem in state government that you exposed in part, but that probably extends far beyond you? I mean, is that fair to say?
There absolutely is, and And I now realize that it was long before me.
Are you familiar with the case of Keith Ellison?
Yes.
Keith Ellison testified under oath before a committee of this body not long ago and insisted to me that he had never done anything wrong and didn't know anything about any of the fraud and abuse. The only problem is that there are records, tape recordings of various fraudsters coming to see him associated with the scandals that the chairwoman was just talking about a moment ago, coming to see him, complaining about people, I think in your department. The fraudsters were saying, oh, we're getting pushback. Who knows? Maybe it was you. We're getting investigated. Can you do something about it? And Ellison said, oh, well, I'll see what I can do. And they offered him campaign contributions, and he took them. Unbelievably. And we know this is all true because they recorded it all. It's the problem when you work with scumbags. They'll double-cross you just like they'll double-cross anybody. The whole thing is on tape. I can't think of a greater instance of abuse of public trust. And if your own attorney general was doing it, who knows how deep, how far, how wide this fraud goes. It's extraordinary. I don't understand why people like him aren't in prison. But I want to applaud you, Ms. Bernstein, for doing your job. And I think it is absolutely shameful that you have been retaliated against and treated like scum when you are a 20-year civil servant, proud Minnesotan, just doing your job. I don't know what your politics are. I don't think it matters. I'm sure it didn't matter to you when you did your job, and yet you're treated like that. And meanwhile, people like Ellison are feted and lauded, and he's a star in his party. It's unbelievable. He's a crook. It's exceptional. We need more people like you who are doing their jobs and who are fighting for the public and fighting for what is right and true and just. And I want to thank you for coming forward, and I want to thank you, Madam Chair, for having this hearing.
Yeah, thank you very much. And now we'll go back to Ranking Member Markey. You're recognized if you would like. Okay, all right. Well, I have a few more questions. Again, we want to thank our witnesses for being here today. So, Mr. Swanson, I'm just going to continue with some of the work that you have done. In your testimony, you had described preparing a report for the Minnesota Inspector General, citing approximately $100 million or more in Minnesota's child care assistance program fraud. And I hear your report was not warmly welcomed by your superiors. So would you share with the committee what happened after that? And you touched upon it in your opening remarks, but if you could just do a deep dive for us and understand, when you raise concerns as an investigator, how was that received?
Madam Chair, yes, the document I wrote was an answer to a request from the Minnesota Office of Legislative Auditor asking for a summary of fraud trends that I saw in CCAP. And I prepared it, and as soon as I gave it to some higher officials in Minnesota, the first official that received it became very angry and said, you can't send this. This is going to make us look bad. And I think my response was, we're losing over $100 million a year just on this program alone. I think we probably deserve to look bad. And then they demanded that I redact most of the most damaging paragraphs from that document. And that's when I told them that I think what you're telling me to do was illegal. Under Minnesota law, we have to cooperate with the legislative auditor. And then a few days later, that official came back to my office and told me that your document's being transmitted to the legislative auditor, but you better be ready for the blank storm that's coming. And from that point on, our entire unit was harassed and vilified for what I put in that document. And again, what they termed the continuous improvement project started with a meeting of our entire team, a lead or head continuous improvement official, and an assistant commissioner at the Department of Human Services. And for approximately 30 minutes, we were verbally beat down, in essence told that we were incompetent and we were worthless employees. And because of that, they were going to do a close look at how our unit operated, and they would attempt to fix our unit. And so we spent literally the next 6 months in meetings with this official where he would ask us questions repeatedly about how the investigative process worked. And then he would give us, quote, homework assignments that would take up a whole bunch of our time between the meetings, and then we would have to report back. And I said this went on for 6 months until in June of 2019, he came out with the changes that were going to be made to the system, and starting with the lead investigator, the supervisor of this unit, and I, who between us we had 70 years of criminal investigative experience. We would no longer be making the decision what child care centers would be investigated. Again, that would be done by a committee of 3, 2 with no experience in this area, and then myself. Then the second thing he directed was that we would be focusing 50% of our time on child care centers receiving very little funding, which meant that we would be spending 50% less time on centers that received $1 million or more a year in funding, because frankly, the cases we were choosing, because we couldn't investigate all the cases, we focused on those high dollar cases, and we were finding fraud right and left with centers that we were paying over $1 million a year to, and we couldn't fathom why somebody would take 50% of our time away from that and focus it on providers receiving less funding.
Right, and it's a real problem, and as many of you have stated or insinuated, that any dollar taken away from valuable programs is a real problem for those families that expect to receive those services and those dollars.
March of 2023, the Senate unanimously passed legislation requiring the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to declassify any and all information related to potential links between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the origins of COVID-19. It passed the House unanimously. President Biden signed it into law, and they finally did release the report. I think we've got a picture of it here that'll appear over my shoulder. It was all of 5 pages. This is, according to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, this is any and all information. Is this all the information the United States government had? If they can get by with blatantly violating the statutes of this country and lying to the American people, I'm sorry, but we don't have a democracy anymore. That Dr. Fauci intervened to put his thumb on the scale of what information the intelligence community, the IC, could review. He supported gain-of-function research to the Wuhan lab, lied about it to Congress, lied about it repeatedly to the chairman, as I recall. So his hands are dirty in this, and yet here he is intervening behind the scenes. It's bad enough that he's out there misleading the public. We've got a witness who's saying under oath that the report that the government issued lied to the American people, that it is false.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Erdman, thank you for being here. In March of 2023, the Senate unanimously passed legislation requiring the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to declassify all, I believe the exact language is, declassify any and all information related to potential links between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the origins of COVID-19. I have some familiarity with this legislation because I wrote it. It passed the House unanimously. President Biden signed it into law under, I think, popular duress. As you may remember, well, first of all, are you familiar with this law?
Oh, of course, yes.
As you may recall, it set a statutory deadline of just a couple of months later, which the Biden administration promptly ignored and blew through. When they finally did release the report, I think we've got a picture of it here that'll appear over my shoulder. It was all of 5 pages. Yeah. Here it is. Wait for it. 5 pages. Remember, the law says any and all information. 5 pages, heavily redacted, even the 5 pages. I think one of those pages is like a cover note or something. Yeah, here it is. The executive summary, 5 pages. This is, according to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, this is any and all information related to COVID-19 and the Wuhan Virology Lab. Now, you've been on this task force that has reviewed these documents. Is this all the information the United States government had?
That is not all the information. And I'll tell you a little story about that if you'd like.
Please.
A little story about your 5 pages there. So there was a classified report being written at the time all of this was going on, And I assumed as I'm reading through the documents that they would just take that classified report, which didn't look like that, and they would just redact it. And because I'm reading through the documents, but that is not what happened. They decided to write a different paper instead of what was already.
Who you say they? Who's they?
The National Intelligence Council.
The National Intelligence Council was at the time that the law passed was doing a thorough review or doing a review. We don't know how thorough. How many pages? You've been on this task force. You've gotten a sense of, if it's not 5 pages, how many pages worth of information would you guess the United States government was in possession of related to Wuhan lab and COVID possible links?
I can tell you that Director Gabbard is working through, I believe, 2,000 pages.
2,000?
They're trying to get released in the first batch. This is the law states yes, any and all, but there's still the requirement to run it through the different agencies to ensure that there's not some sources and methods. But there's like 2,000 pages.
2,000 pages. 2,000 pages. I want to show you what Admiral Haynes, Director Haynes, said to me when I wrote to her, Senator Braun and I wrote to her following this outrageous, ridiculous report. She wrote back to me and said, well, we declassified only what we could without endangering sources and methods. Only what we could. 5 pages of summary that itself has redactions. The 5 pages have redactions. And you're telling me there are literally thousands of documents. Why are they hiding all of this material?
I can tell you that the interagency process of declassification is highly bureaucratic, and that is being worked. And I think you saw just a few days ago, Director Gabbard released some information about the lab.
Was Director Haynes, Admiral Haynes, was she involved in making the decision not to release the material?
I don't have any proof that she was involved in the direct decision. I have no emails saying that directly, but.
It was her office, and it's her signature on the letter to me. It's her office that sent the 5 pages. She's the one who said, this is what we have. This is all we have. You're telling me there were 2,000 plus documents.
No, I'm
they
telling you
sent us
that
5.
the first swath of documents that we're looking to, there's many more than that.
I got you. Many more. Let me tell you what this so-called 5-page report, what it said in its substance, to the extent there was any. They said, number one, that nothing that was researched at the Wuhan lab could plausibly be a progenitor of SARS-CoV-2. Number two, they said there is no evidence of any research-related incident involving Wuhan employees that might have been related to the pandemic. Now, in your experience, given what you have seen, are those true statements?
Some of that would have to be covered and classified, but no, they're not true. If we wanted to get into details, I don't believe that's true.
So the United States government first deliberately violated a law passed by Congress, signed by the president, that ordered them to release all information related to the Wuhan lab, number one. Number two, they then violated the law again by withholding thousands and thousands of pages that they had at the time and knew were covered by the law. And number three, the conclusions, so-called, they released to the public are false. If that is not a cover-up, I don't know what is. And if our elected officials and unelected officials in this case, in the IC, and ODNI, if they can get by with blatantly violating the statutes of this country and lying to the American people, I'm sorry, but we don't have a democracy anymore. I don't know what it is, but it's not a democracy because we, the people, aren't in charge. These people are in charge, and they're lying to us every single day. You said in your opening statement that Dr. Fauci, speaking of someone who's not exactly a truth teller, that Dr. Fauci intervened to put his thumb on the scale of what information the intelligence community, the IC, could review when they did their initial assessments of whether or not the Wuhan lab was linked to COVID. What exactly did he do?
So let me clarify that. So he reached in and he provided this list of scientists and subject matter experts that we should talk to. And it's not like he's saying, you will go talk to them. He doesn't have the power to do that technically. It's just that the bureaucracy in place at the time was perfectly happy to pursue those recommendations, even when there was a number of individuals who expressed concern, saying, at least one for sure, that said, are you sure we want to do this? He's a policymaker, and we need to have our intelligence cycle.
And he had a point of view, did he not?
He certainly did. And here's
And what was that point of view? Just refresh our memories.
he believes it's natural origin. He still does.
Of course. I mean, he said this over and over. Now, he would have reason to, given that he supported gain-of-function research to the Wuhan lab, lied about it to Congress, lied about it repeatedly to the chairman, as I recall. So his hands are dirty in this. And yet here he is intervening behind the scenes. It's bad enough that he's out there misleading the public. Behind the scenes, he's trying to intervene to stop our own intelligence community, who are supposed to work for the public, from actually accurately assessing the evidence. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. And then people wonder, gee, why are the American people not trusting of elected officials? I wonder, why are they? I'll tell you why, because we are repeatedly lied to by these people. Lied to and lied to and lied to. I want to thank you, Mr. Erdman, for your testimony. I just want to note, I think we've only scratched the surface here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing. And I just want to point out, when you've got a witness who's saying under oath that the report that the government issued lied to the American people, that it is false, we've got a big problem in this country. We've got a big, big problem, and we haven't begun to solve it yet.
Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. It's great to have this hearing. Thanks for calling it. Thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. Professor Shaw, nice to see you again. Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and they have been abused.
Wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait,
no.
So your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
Is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction
issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions
What is the
are a problem.
principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. Yeah. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential consideration.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think that's
what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who are injured.
No, you're not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I think that...
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is it the same
I believe in a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What
Constraint
is the
legitimates
principle?
power.
What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart, the Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit strange?
A very plausible explanation,
Senator,
Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think
you must
this
concede that
was
as a
never
possibility.
used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually.
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator.
like
And the 1960s is where some scholars locate the beginning
Can you
of this, but
identify one
others.
before then?
Mila Sahoni, who's another scholar of universal injunction, suggests 1913 is actually the first. There were others in the 20s.
The Republic endured for 150 years before there was a nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are
Is
no
that
meaningful
blind?
constraints on the president is a very dangerous system
That's
of law.
not what you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was
every president
You
is
said that is
constrained
not what
and
you
must be.
said. You said it was
Absolutely.
a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
Supreme
when
Court
Joe
Senator
Biden
agreed-
was president. Wait a minute.
agreed
Wait a
9-0
minute.
with me on
you
that
also
case,
said
to
when
be
Joe
clear.
Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed. And the combination of parties without standing and the single judge division.
No. We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
issued in a case
we
where
can go
no
round
one
and
had
round on this.
standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes, and Senator Kennedy had you for 6 or 7. You couldn't identify a single principled basis. We all know the truth here, which is it's not just you. It's most of my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, who I respect a great deal, and they were raising very principled objections to the nationwide injunction just 6 months ago, maybe 9 now. And you're probably right. My point is that all that's changed in 9 months is the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I realize that my colleagues on this side of the aisle very much dislike that individual, and I realize that you think that the rulings that he has lost are fundamentally sound. We might grant all of that. I disagree with all of that, but we can put that to one side. The question we're talking about here is, should judges, single judges, district court judges, be able to bind non-parties who are not in front of them? And you used to say no, now you say yes. Let's be consistent. I would just suggest to you our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I briefly respond?
Sure.
I mean, you invoked democracy a couple of times there, Senator. Judges are part of our system of democracy. Democracy is not as simple as majority rule. Judges have always served something of a
You would have it be as simple as
function.
majority rule. When you get the majority you like, you're for the nationwide injunction. When you don't, you're not.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give you the opportunity that I often found absolutely precious when I was arguing before panel judges and couldn't get my answer.
Senator Josh Hawley's argument reflects a growing conservative frustration with what many Republicans see as an increasingly politicized judiciary, willing to stretch its authority whenever Donald Trump is involved. The core concern is not simply whether courts can rule against a president. Conservatives accept that courts play a constitutional role, but whether single district judges should be able to impose sweeping nationwide policies affecting millions of people who were never part of a case. To many on the right, the explosion of nationwide injunctions against Trump looks less like neutral law and more like judicial activism disguised as constitutional oversight. What especially resonates with conservatives is the apparent inconsistency from legal scholars and Democrats who previously condemned nationwide injunctions during the Biden administration, but now defend them aggressively under Trump. Republicans argue that the standard should not change depending on who occupies the White House. If nationwide injunctions were supposedly dangerous to democracy under Biden, then suddenly celebrating them under Trump exposes what many conservatives believe is a purely political double standard. The broader issue here is institutional credibility. Americans are increasingly losing faith in the idea that legal decisions are based on neutral constitutional principles rather than partisan outcomes. Republicans see a troubling pattern where extraordinary legal tools are embraced whenever they can be used to block conservative policies, but condemned when they constrain progressive administrations. That perception fuels distrust not only toward courts but toward academia, media institutions, and political elites more broadly. Conservatives also argue that these judicial tactics effectively transfer enormous policymaking power away from elected representatives and into the hands of unelected judges. From immigration to executive authority to federal regulations, nationwide injunctions can instantly halt policies supported by millions of voters based on the ruling of a single court. To Republicans, that undermines democratic accountability and encourages blatant forum shopping, where activists search for ideologically friendly judges to achieve political outcomes they could not secure legislatively. Another reason this issue has become so politically explosive is because many conservatives believe the legal establishment increasingly treats Trump as an exception to every norm. Actions once criticized as abuses of judicial power are suddenly justified as necessary guardrails when aimed at him. Republicans warn that this mindset is dangerous.
As the echoes of Josh Hawley's final question settle in the Senate chamber, the weight of the evidence is undeniable. We have seen the stuttering, we have seen the panicked glances at legal teams, and most importantly, we've seen the fear in the eyes of those who thought they were untouchable. Hawley didn't just expose a secret today. He reminded us that when the law is weaponized, the only defense is the truth. When Hawley looked them in the face and said, "It's finally over," he was signaling an end to the era where bureaucracy could hide behind closed doors. This takedown will go down in history as the moment the system was caught red-handed in 4K. But the real battle is just beginning. Washington wants you to forget this video by tomorrow morning. They want you to stay distracted by the next manufactured headline, hoping you'll move on. But after what we've witnessed today, that is no longer an option. Supportive. This community is the last line of defense against these lies. We want to hear from you right now. Do you think the system is beyond repair? Or is Hawley the one who can actually bring accountability back to DC? Drop a comment below with the word justice if you want the truth to keep coming. We read every single comment, and your voice is the only thing they can't manage or silence. If you're ready to stand with Hawley and protect our future, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know before it's suppressed. The game is over for them, but for us, the revolution of truth has just begun. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.